Hello, everyone, to today's episode of Getting In, a College Coach Conversation. I'm Sally Ganga from College Coach. This continues to be a stressful time, but I'm happy to report some good news. University of Connecticut, as one example, will be trying out test optional for 3 cycles, beginning with the entering class of 2021. So for those of you who've been having trouble getting any testing done, there are some solutions out there. That said, I do want to be clear that we would still advise you to plan to take the SAT or ACT if you haven't yet, as you may be applying to a college that requires it. In fact, my second guest, Megan Stubendeck from Arbor Bridge, a test prep company, will be joining me today to give advice for juniors given all the changes due to COVID-19. For my third segment, I'll be talking with my colleague Alex Bickford about funding and online education, which is also very relevant to our current situation. But first, I'm very excited to have as my guest Rick Bischoff, who's been patiently waiting on camera. Rick is the Vice President for Enrollment Management at Case Western Reserve University in a beautiful spot in Cleveland, Ohio. Also, always like to make sure people know that. I don't know that Cleveland has the best reputation, but the fact is there are beautiful parts of it, and that is where Case Western is. Rick is also a former colleague of mine at the University of Chicago, and he's joining us to talk about applying to computer science programs and how that differs from other majors. So Rick, thanks so much for joining us here today.
Very happy to be here with you, Sally.
All right, so computer science is a pretty complicated, let's start off by saying that I only worked at small liberal arts colleges that didn't have computer science. So although actually University of Chicago did, but there's a lot of confusion. It was really something that I had to learn about. And I know that a lot of people have confusion. I talk to students who say, I want to do computer science because they like playing video games. I talk to students who, on the other hand, are really, really good at math. They like to program. So when they say they want to do computer science, I'm a little more optimistic about it. But I was hoping that you could maybe address some of sort of the differences with a student applying to a computer science program versus a student, say, applying to be a math major or English or history or whatever that might be.
Well, I think the first thing is for students to understand kind of what it is and what they're getting into. As you say, you like to play video games does not mean you should be a computer scientist. People often think of coding. Yes, coding is a piece of it, but you're going to study things that are much bigger than just coding, data structures, and kind of a whole host of things that will lead you to an incredible variety of careers. In looking at computer science programs, the first thing that students should understand is that computer science programs are incredibly competitive for admission. It is, incredibly competitive because all of us, even the liberal arts colleges with computer science programs, have an abundance of applicants because lots of students want to go into computer science. And so making sure that you have, some previous experience, maybe you've taken a computer science class in high school, so we can read your application and say, okay, you've got some idea of what you're doing and this is something you like and you want to spend more time doing. But then, realizing that you're going into a very, very competitive applicant pool and you need to plan appropriately with your college counselor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, actually, I even have I have people who kind of are always sort of trying to find a backdoor way in. Like they say, well, I know that computer science is much tougher to get into, so I'm going to apply into math and then I can transfer in. And then my response is, you really might not be able to transfer in. So I was hoping you could address that at Case.
Yeah, that's a strategy I've never quite understood. I'm going to tell them I'm going to study something else and hope that I can do the thing that I really want to do, rather than choose a college where I know I can do what I want to do from the beginning. Mm-hmm. That doesn't make sense to me. Mm-hmm. There are many institutions where, if you're not admitted as a first-year student to computer science, you can never transfer in. Even those that have the ability to transfer, those transfer slots may be incredibly, incredibly limited. And so if you really want to do computer science, you need to be applying to schools where you're going to be competitive for admission in computer science and not trying to come through some back door that may never open for you.
Hmm. So when you talk about it being more competitive, let's kind of dig into what that means. Like how much more competitive at a school like Case Western compared to someone who is applying, is thinking about math. Like how much more competitive would computer science be if that student chose that instead?
I mean, my advice to students would be, typically look at us at a university's academic profile, and if you're looking at something like computer science, you should probably be in the top quarter of that academic profile. To then think that okay, I may really have a chance there. If you're at the middle of that school's profile academically, you're going to be at a huge disadvantage from day one walking in. Now, you mentioned test optional at the top of the hour. uh, you know Normally I would say, look at testing profiles, look at look at if they publish average GPAs, curriculum recommendations, things like that. It's going to be harder, as we move forward over the next couple of years, as more and more institutions, ourselves included, have moved to test optional because of the testing disruptions. It's going to make the landscape harder for students to understand, but they still need to be performing. Their curriculum needs to be more challenging than the average applicant to that university. Their grades need to be stronger than other applicants applying to that university, because that's what they're competing with.
Right. So, and I'm assuming like, I mean, I'm sure you don't have hard and fast rules, but like ideally a student has AP calculus and maybe for some reason they weren't able to be that advanced in math. So then maybe it's honors pre-calculus, like that kind of thing, right?
Yeah, and it, of course, it depends on the college or university that you're applying to and
Right.
their level of selectivity.
Hmm.
If you're looking at a university where most of the folks coming in to the university, or most of the students coming into any of the STEM fields, are going to have calculus, yeah, you're probably going to need to be in calculus in order to be competitive. You touch on one of the things that I always find puzzling. I'll have students say, oh, gee, I want to do computer science. And then I start asking them questions about their math preparation, and their answer is, oh, I don't really like math. Yeah, you got to take some math. You got to take less math if you're going to do a Bachelor of Arts in Computer Science. You got to take a lot of math if you're going to do a Bachelor of Science in Computer Science.
Hmm.
And so, you want to like math if you're going to do computer science. There are lots of things that you learn in math in terms of the way it wires your brain that are very constructive as a computer science major.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, I've had conversations with families about them, and some of them end up being very upset with me when I talk about how important math is. They're really not happy about it, and I've tried to explain that math is I think is probably the most predictive as far as a student's level of
Yeah.
success, because computer science classes at the high school level tend to be easier than the math classes, but they're using similar thought processes, right? I mean, am I wrong about that? Please feel
Yeah.
free to correct me.
No, I don't think you're wrong about it. I mean, it's I'll confess, I was an undergraduate math major. I have forgotten most of the math that I learned 30 plus years ago. But what I've retained is the kind of logical structured thinking that you learn in math. And, that's computer science.
Hmm.
And so, training your mind in that way is going to be very good in computer science. And people who are going to be very good in computer science are probably going to find those same skills rewarded in their math courses.
Hmm.
So,
Hmm.
for high school students, don't give up on the math. Keep taking the math courses.
Hmm.
And we see all kinds of things where students may come into a new high school and they're in ninth grade, and their previous school didn't put them on a math track to end, in BC calculus. Well, that's okay.
Right.
We see that, but you want to keep pushing along at the appropriate level.
Hmm. And I mean, really take the most advanced math classes that you can handle.
Yes.
I mean, without a doubt, even, and this comes up a lot too, even if you're risking a B, I mean, at least I would
Oh,
think for a school like Case, if you're not in the at least honors pre-calculus, then you're probably not going to be competitive, right? There are schools where you still will be.
I mean, we see it all the time. If you're applying to competitive STEM programs. And we see students who they're, in pre-calculus their junior year. The next logical math course would be maybe a calculus course or a Calc AB class, and instead they opt for an AP Stats.
Mhm.
And that's really tough, because not only are they missing a year of math in high school, but now they're going to come in as a first year student, expect to take a calculus course, and they've been away from the kind of math that prepares them for calculus for 16 months. That's a huge deficit to start with. And
Mhm.
so, when we look at that from a competitiveness perspective, we're gonna opt for that student who chose to stay on the calculus route, and heaven forbid, even if they get a B,
Mhm.
they're going to be in a much, much better position.
Okay. I'm glad to hear all my advice has been correct so far. So very glad to hear.
Hey, it's shocking to me too.
Yeah,
Okay.
I know. Now wait a minute. We're having a conversation after the show. All right. So I was hoping too, we have a little time. So I was wondering if we could pivot to the difference between like a Bachelor of Arts in Computer Science within the College of Arts and Sciences compared to the Bachelor of Science in Computer Science within the College of Engineering. I think that's confusing to a lot of students.
Yeah, and different universities will have different structures. So some might have both a BS and a BA in a College of Arts and Sciences. We're a place that actually teaches the BA and the BS we teach it in the School of Engineering.
Okay.
But so primarily what you're going to see, the BA is going to require you to take fewer computer science courses typically, and fewer STEM courses outside directly of computer science. And so the BA is a degree that is really appealing for students who have another interest. I want to do political science and computer science. I want to do computer science, but I also want to major in business, because you have the room and the flexibility to tie those things together. If you're doing a BS in computer science, and you're right, most typically it is going to be housed in the computer science, in the engineering school. And that may mean that you're taking the same engineering core that every other engineer is doing. In our case, if you're going to do a BA in computer science, you're going to do 2 semesters of calculus as a requirement for that. If you're going to do the BS in computer science, you're going to do 4. And you're going to do, chemistry, physics, you're going to do a whole host of courses. So it's going to be an in-depth, very rigorous, quantitative, broad-based science approach with computer science on top. And probably in a BS program, probably half of your courses are going to be in computer science.
All right. So very, very sort of different structure. And
yes.
I like the way you describe this. Like I'm actually working with a student right now who likes computer science, but also likes business. And so for her, clearly, I think it's the BA is what she's
absolutely
wanting to do.
So. Yeah, absolutely. And there's nothing wrong with a BA. If you want a career in computer science, you can do a BA and go on and have a career, in computer science. You can go on, if you decide you want to do a master's degree, in computer science or some related field, you're going to have the preparation to do that. But the BS, you're all in on computer science. And to do a BS in computer science, and a business major in 4 years, you'd have to be very special in order to do that.
Yeah, and like really not have fun in college, I think.
No. No. So, for some students, the BA really is the best route. And that's a conversation when I'm talking with a student. When I'm trying to figure out where to direct them, I'm not talking to them about their computer science interest. I'm talking to them about what else do you want to get out of college? And some students will say, all I want to do is this one thing. And you're like, okay, have I got a program for you? But for the student who says, oh, but I like sociology and I want to take some English classes, and what about political science and maybe some business classes? You're like, oh, okay, do a BA, because then you can still do all of those other things you love to do.
Okay, that's great. And so we only have like 1 minute left, but basically students, if they want to find out which one they should do, you've given them a general rule of thumb, but they should talk to their admission officer, it sounds
Yeah.
like, and that admission officer can guide them in the right direction.
Well, and look at, it's not hard to do. Go and look at the requirements for each degree. And because they're going to lay out exactly what you need to do. And there are plenty of students who come in saying, I want to do computer science. And they look at what's required for the BS and they're like, whoa, not for me. And others who look at that and say, oh my God, that looks like so much fun. Well, you know what you should do.
Okay. All right, great. Listen, Rick, thank you so much. That was extremely helpful.
All right. Very good to see you, Sally.
Nice to see you too. All right. Take care. All right. So now we're going to take a short break, but when we return, I'll be talking with Megan Stubendeck about the current state of standardized testing